The hangar smelled of ozone and machine oil, a place of beginnings and endings. Commander Elias Kane stood at attention before the sleek spearhead of the dropship that would carry him into the unknown, his reflection stretched thin against the hull's polished surface. Around him, officers bustled with last-minute checks, their faces carefully blank. He had served long enough to recognize the silence behind their efficiency. Pity clung to the air as tangibly as smoke. The mission briefing still burned in his memory, an uncharted world, once the seat of an empire long since devoured by its own hubris. Automated guardians remained, machines older than any Union record, slaughtering every expedition sent against them. The Council of the Galactic Union had declared the world a contagion, unassailable, lethal, a scar to be ignored. Yet when humanity pushed for inclusion into the Union, eager to prove its worth, the Council found an opportunity. Kane was to go alone, with only his dropship and his skill, to neutralize what no fleet had managed. Officially, it was framed as a test of courage, a chance for humanity to prove its mettle. Unofficially, Kane read it for what it was, exile wrapped in ceremony. "You're being honored," Admiral Strathmore had told him during the close session, his voice grave with the weight of false sincerity. No one else was considered. Elias had met the older man's gaze, searching for some trace of truth, and found only regret hidden behind protocol. He had saluted anyway. Orders were orders, even when they reeked of betrayal. Now, as the last crates of supplies were loaded, Kane ran his hand along the dropship's cold hull. He felt the scars in his flesh, reminders of a lifetime spent in service, battles against pirates, insurgents, border skirmishes where human fleets had been treated as expendable auxiliaries. Humanity was tolerated but never trusted, always the junior partner in an alliance that pretended equality. And he, loyal to a fault, had become the perfect candidate for their sacrificial spectacle. A young ensign approached, eyes wide and throat tight. "Sir," she said, voice trembling as she offered him a data slate. "Your final clearances." He accepted it with a nod, studying her. She couldn't have been more than 20, still believing in the myths of honor and glory. She wanted to say something, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to wish him luck, but her mouth tightened instead. She saluted sharply and retreated before the words could betray her. The dropship's ramp groaned shut, sealing him inside. The command deck hummed to life as he slid into the pilot's chair. Alone. No squad, no fleet, no lifeline. Just him against a world that had swallowed entire armadas. The engines roared, pressing him back in his seat as the hangar doors peeled open to the void. Stars swallowed him whole. The voyage was long, measured not in days but in the steady rhythm of isolation. Kane passed the time with maintenance drills, recalibrating systems that did not need recalibration, reviewing schematics of the enemy world provided by the Union. Sparse data, half-corrupted, painted only fragments, surface shattered by tectonic upheaval, atmosphere barely breathable, electromagnetic storms that gnawed at senses. And always the same chilling notation, automated defenses encountered. 0 survivors. When the planet finally filled his viewport, it looked every bit the tomb it was rumored to be. A sphere of broken mountains and ash seas, storms flickering across its surface like restless ghosts. Lightning scarred the horizon, illuminating towers of alien design jutting skyward at impossible angles. The sight stirred something deep within him, awe, dread, perhaps even defiance. He guided the dropship into descent. Alarms shrieked as turbulence clawed at the hull, but Kane held steady. Flames licked the viewport, then cleared to reveal the shattered surface rushing up to meet him. He aimed for a plateau marked as stable, though stable meant little in a world that had defied entire civilizations. The dropship landed hard, struts groaning in protest. Dust swirled across the barren plain, painting the ship in shades of desolation. Kane cycled the hatch and stepped onto alien soil, the gravity heavier than Earth's, the air metallic and thin in his lungs. His visor adjusted, filtering toxins and glare. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the ground trembled. Shapes emerged from the haze, constructs of metal and stone, their forms both mechanical and grotesque. Limbs elongated, weapons fused into bodies, eyes glowing with cold intelligence. They moved with predatory grace, as if the centuries had been nothing but a pause in their vigilance. Kane's rifle snapped to his shoulder. The first machine lunged, blades shrieking against his armor. He fired point-blank, round sparking against plating, tearing through a joint. The construct collapsed, writhing as its systems shorted. But two more advanced, flanking with terrifying coordination. Adrenaline surged, narrowing the world to survival. Kane rolled aside, firing bursts into exposed seams, exploiting weaknesses through instinct and experience. He felled one, then another, but not without cost. A jagged strike pierced his side, searing pain flaring as his suit's med system struggled to compensate. Blood thickened in his throat, but he stayed upright, forcing himself to move, to fight, to endure. When the last construct fell, smoking and twitching in the dust, Kane staggered to his knees. His breath came ragged, his vision dimming at the edges. Already, more shapes stirred in the distance, drawn by the violence. There would be no end to them, not like this. He pressed a hand against his wound, warmth seeping between his fingers, and forced himself upright. He could retreat to the dropship, try to lift off and flee, but he knew the Union had no intention of retrieving him. If he left, he would die in orbit or drift until oxygen failed. This world was his grave, unless he made it something else. The horizon shimmered with lightning, illuminating the silhouette of ruins beyond the plain. Towers, vast and broken, half buried in stone. A remnant of the empire that had birthed these machines. Perhaps a refuge. Perhaps a final trap. But it was the only path left. Kane stumbled forward, each step a battle against pain and despair. The constructs did not pursue immediately, as if content to let him crawl deeper into their domain. He laughed once, bitter and breathless, at the irony. Sent to die, and the machines were patient enough to watch him oblige. But something in him refused. Betrayal had brought him here, stripped of honor and hope. Yet as he limped toward the ruins, a spark flared in the darkness of his chest, a refusal to yield, a defiance born not of duty but of survival. If this world was meant to consume him, then he would consume it first. The storm broke overhead, rain hissing against his armor. Kane pressed onward, into the ruins, into the jaws of the impossible. He did not know that the path ahead would reshape him, that the man who staggered into the darkness would not be the same one who emerged. For now, it was enough that he was still alive. The ruins loomed like broken teeth against the storm, jagged silhouettes carved from stone and metal. Kane moved through them with deliberate care, each step testing the limits of his endurance. His side throbbed, blood seeping steadily beneath the sealing foam of his suit, but pain had become a dull companion rather than a crippling force. He scanned the towering structures, their surfaces etched with patterns too precise to be weather's work, lines that seemed to shift subtly when caught in the lightning's glare. The machines had been guardians, yes, but something greater had designed them. This place was not simply a graveyard, it was an inheritance left abandoned. He paused before a vast archway half-collapsed into rubble. Carvings of figures adorned its surface, elongated beings whose limbs stretched beyond human proportion, their faces hidden behind ornate helms. In their hands they bore both weapons and what looked like seeds, as if they had sown destruction and creation alike. Kane raised his rifle, nerves prickling, but no movement stirred within. The silence pressed in heavier than the storm. He entered. Inside, the air grew colder, muffled by stone corridors that swallowed sound. His helmet's lamp cast a pale beam, sliding across shattered walls and debris. Strange glyphs glowed faintly, pulsing as if in response to his presence. He touched one, and a tremor rippled through the chamber. Lights flared further down the passage, illuminating a massive hall. There, waiting in the shadows, was something unlike the constructs he had fought. It was taller, its form more refined, armored not in crude plating, but in sleek layers of obsidian-like metal. Its head tilted, twin points of light burning where eyes might be, studying him with an intelligence sharper than the drones he had faced. Kane froze, weapon raised. The figure did not advance. Instead, it extended an arm. Not in threat, but in invitation. His throat tightened. He had expected ambushes, expected endless waves of machines until his ammunition or body failed. He had not expected this, an adversary, or ally, that acknowledged him as more than prey. His finger hovered near the trigger. One pull, and the thing would collapse into sparks and ruin. But another part of him, the soldier who had survived by listening as much as fighting, held back. The construct spoke. The sound was a low resonance, mechanical yet threaded with something hauntingly alive. His suit translated, voice grainy but clear, "You are not of them. You bleed. You endure." Kane swallowed hard. "And you are?" The lights in its gaze pulsed. "Custodian. Last sentinel of what was. Bound until the end." The words carried weight, but more than that, they carried exhaustion. Kane recognized it instantly, the same weariness etched into veterans who had seen too many wars. Whoever or whatever had built this being, it had served long beyond its purpose. "What do you want from me?" Kane asked, though the question already burned with suspicion. The custodian tilted its head. "Not want. Need. You are different from the others they sent. They came with fleets, with fire. They sought to unmake. You seek only to live." Kane almost laughed, though bitterness hollowed the sound. "They sent me here to die." The construct's gaze did not waver. "Then in your death, perhaps we both may find freedom." The chamber shuddered as if in answer. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. In the distance, Kane heard the echo of metal striking stone, the lesser constructs closing in. The custodian straightened, its form radiating grim authority. "The swarm stays. They are not my kin, not anymore. They are disease-given form, corrupted guardians who lost purpose when their makers fell. They will not stop until all intruders are ash." The conflict sharpened then, not in the clash of weapons, but in the unspoken choice between them. Kane could fight on alone, bleed out against an enemy that had already consumed countless others. Or he could gamble on this relic, this weary sentinel whose loyalty was not to the Union, not even to humanity, but to a vanished empire and its fading will. He adjusted his grip on the rifle, chest heaving with the weight of the decision. The Union had betrayed him, cast him into the jaws of oblivion. Trust was a currency he could not afford. Yet survival demanded risk, and he could feel the tide of constructs drawing nearer with every second. Kane lowered his weapon, though not fully. "If we do this, I don't serve you. I don't bow to your cause. We fight because I refuse to die here. Nothing more." The custodian inclined its head, almost solemn. "Then we are agreed. I fight not for command. I fight for ending." The hall trembled again, louder this time. Shadows twisted at the edges of the chamber, limbs clicking, eyes burning. The swarm poured in, their screeches piercing even through Kane's helmet. He braced himself, but the custodian moved first. Its arm unfolded into a blade of radiant energy, cleaving the first wave apart with impossible precision. Sparks lit the air as Kane opened fire, their unspoken pact sealed in blood and steel. They fought as if born to the same rhythm, one cutting through lines of machines with devastating arcs, the other striking down stragglers with surgical fire. The battle was not victory. It was survival scraped raw, every breath bought with another kill. Kane's muscles screamed, his side burned, but he pressed on, driven by the strange certainty that for the first time since this mission began, he was no longer entirely alone. When the last construct collapsed, silence fell heavy again, broken only by the storm outside. Kane leaned against a pillar, chest heaving. The custodian stood motionless, blade dissolving back into its arm, its twin eyes fixed on him. "You endure," it said once more, and this time there was no machine in the tone, only a quiet recognition, as if it had found in him something it had searched for across centuries. Kane met its gaze, a flicker of something unfamiliar, stirring, beneath his exhaustion. Not trust, not yet, but possibility. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the ruins in stark relief. The swarm would return, stronger, endless. The Union would never come for him. His only hope, his only chance to defy the death they had written for him, now stood at his side. And deep in his chest, that spark of defiance grew brighter. Stars stretched across the void like a tapestry, and Kane watched them from the command deck of a vessel that had not existed until his hands and will reshaped it. The custodian's guidance had opened vaults of forgotten power, and the swarm that once hunted him now bent to his command, their corrupted programming overwritten, their hunger tempered by his purpose. What had begun as survival had grown into something far greater, a fleet, forged from the very weapons meant to erase him. Their hulls gleamed obsidian against the void, their forms sleek, efficient, terrifying. Humanity's betrayers had wanted him erased. Instead, he had become a shadow no star could conceal. Time had reshaped him as surely as the alien machines. His scars had thickened into maps of defiance, his frame hardened by endless war. Yet it was not the body alone that had changed. His mind carried the weight of command, his every thought sharpened by the custodian's counsel. They had fought together across ruins and wastelands, until Kane no longer thought of the Sentinel as an alien relic, but as a comrade, one bound by duty, another by vengeance, yet both unwilling to break. Now, as his fleet drifted toward the edge of Union space, Kane weighed the reality that awaited him. Years had passed, though how many he could not count precisely. To the Union, he was surely dead, another failed soldier lost in the endless catalogue of history. To humanity, his name was a whisper, perhaps forgotten. But he had not forgotten, nor forgiven. Sensors pulsed, and the custodian's voice reverberated within the chamber, steady and calm. Contact ahead. Vessels approaching. They are not of your people. Kane adjusted his stance, eyes narrowing on the holographic display. A formation of ships was moving toward them, angular and predatory, their signal markers unmistakable. The Dravari, rivals to humanity within the Union, eager opportunists who had argued most loudly for Kane's mission of sacrifice. They had sought proof of humanity's weakness, and now their ships prowled near a human colony's frontier, blades poised to strike. They are here to claim what's ours, Kane muttered, fury simmering beneath his calm. His hand hovered over the console, the fleet awaiting his command like a predator on a leash. The custodian regarded him, silent for a long moment before speaking. This is your test. Will you return to them as vengeance, or as salvation? The words struck deeper than any blade. Kane's heart hammered with the memory of betrayal, of the Union's cold dismissal. But another memory rose, gently yet no less powerful. His people. The men and women who had fought beside him, the colonies that had struggled under alien pressure, the children who deserved more than to grow in chains. He clenched his jaw. Neither. I'll return as what they need most. With a gesture, his fleet surged forward. The battle began not with hesitation, but with violence that shook the void. Dravari cruisers unleashed volleys of plasma, streaks of fire cutting across black space, but Kane's machines moved with uncanny coordination. Their shields drank in the energy, their counterfire precise, calculated. Where the Dravari struck in chaos, Kane's forces answered with discipline. Ships folded under the onslaught, torn apart piece by piece, until panic rippled through their formation. Kane stood firm, his voice cutting through the comms to his subcommanders, machines who obeyed not out of programming, but because his will had replaced their corruption. Drive them from our colony. Leave survivors. Let them run, and let them remember who waits in the dark. The custodian's eyes glowed brighter at his restraint. You temper vengeance with mercy. This is strength they will not understand. When the last Dravari ship broke and fled, Kane's fleet held its ground, forming a protective cordon around the colony. Messages from the human settlers flooded through, disbelief, or prayers spoken aloud to a ghost they thought long gone. Kane listened, but answered only once. His voice was low, steady, carrying the weight of both promise and warning. You are not alone. Not anymore. The words rippled outward, broadcast by rumor and fear, until they spread beyond the colony itself. Whispers grew into stories across the Union. A dead soldier had returned. A fleet of alien war machines moved with him, a power no council had sanctioned. Some called him a savior, others a heretic. Leaders who once condemned humanity now trembled, for the weapon they had cast aside had risen beyond their control. Back aboard the flagship, Kane stared at the stars in silence. He knew this victory was only the first step. The Union would not welcome him. Some of humanity's own leaders would see him as a threat. And yet, he could not stop. The custodian stood beside him, silent as stone, but when it finally spoke, there was no judgment in its voice, only conviction. You cannot return to who you were. That man is ash. But you may yet choose what you become. Kane's reflection stared back at him in the viewport glass, a scarred figure cloaked in shadows and fire. He did not see the broken soldier the Union had discarded. He saw the beginning of something else, an answer the galaxy had never prepared for. Beyond the colony, the void stretched wide, waiting. And somewhere, fleets massed, alliances schemed, and leaders plotted. They had sent him to die. Now they would face the truth. He had returned, and he would not leave quietly. The chamber of the Galactic Union's High Council was a monument to arrogance. Suspended above a star's corona, it blazed with refracted light that painted every delegate in golden hues. Kane stood at its center, not as a supplicant, but as a storm in waiting. His armor bore the scars of countless battles, and behind him loomed the silent presence of the custodian, eyes like twin suns burning through the gilded facade. The delegates shifted uneasily, their murmurs a low tide of fear and defiance. They had expected a ghost story, not a man-made steel and fire. A Dravari speaker rose first, voice sharp as broken glass. You bring abominations into Union space. War machines. Weapons that should have been entombed forever. Do you expect us to celebrate your heresy? Kane's gaze swept across the hall, lingering not only on his enemies but on the human representatives who could not meet his eyes. You sent me to die. You sent me with no support, no chance, because you feared what I might prove. And I proved it anyway. I survived. And I brought back the strength you lack. Gasps rippled through the chamber, not from the words but from the quiet authority with which they were delivered. Kane did not shout. He did not need to. His presence carried the weight of 1,000 silent soldiers, of colonies bled dry while politicians bartered away futures. A human delegate finally spoke, voice trembling. Commander Kane, you must understand the delicacy of your actions. Reprogramming alien constructs, building a fleet outside council oversight, it will be seen as an act of rebellion. Kane's lips curled, but the expression was not quite a smile. Rebellion? No. Survival. While you debated trade routes and border treaties, your rivals preyed on our colonies. I stopped them. Where were you? The custodian's voice reverberated, filling the chamber like thunder rolling through stone. He stands where you would not. He endures where you faltered. Your words are dust. Delegates recoiled at the intrusion, but Kane did not. He let the silence that followed hang heavy until the weight of truth pressed down harder than any weapon. Then, he took a single step forward. I do not seek conquest, he said, his tone measured but unyielding. I do not want thrones or chains. What I offer is salvation. The machines that once devoured intruders now serve under my command. With them, I can shield humanity, shield the Union itself, if it chooses. But understand this. Whether you stand with me or against me, I will not allow my people to be sacrificed again. The council erupted into chaos. Some demanded his arrest, others called for negotiation, and a few whispered that perhaps this man was the Union's only hope. Kane stood unmoved, letting their fear clash against their ambition. He knew politics well enough to recognize the truth. They would never agree until blood proved who was right. The moment came swifter than expected. Alarms shrieked through the chamber as reports flooded in, an unknown armada breaching the system's edge. A coalition of factions, long jealous of the Union's power, had chosen this moment to strike. Their fleet outnumbered the Council's defenses 3-1. Delegates panicked, their grand chamber shaking under distant bombardments. Kane turned to the custodian, who inclined its head in solemn readiness. The choice had been made for them. Bring my fleet, Kane ordered. From the void, his war machines surged, rising like a tide of black iron and burning light. They intercepted the enemy with lethal precision, carving through formations that had expected to face a fractured Union, not a commander risen from death. Kane directed them with the calm certainty of a man who had fought the impossible and won. The custodian moved beside him, its voice carrying across the command network like the pulse of a war drum. In the chaos, Kane did not seek glory. He sought only to hold the line, to show the Union and the galaxy that humanity could not be erased. His ships fought not as raiders but as guardians, intercepting volleys, shielding colonies, dismantling enemies with brutal efficiency. Where fear might have broken others, Kane's voice anchored them all. When the battle ended, silence fell across the stars. The invaders were broken, their remnants fleeing into the void. Kane's fleet held formation, disciplined and unwavering, while Union defenses lay shattered but alive. Back in the council chamber, no one spoke. The delegates who had condemned him now stared at him as if at a force of nature. He did not revel in their awe. He only spoke once more, his voice quiet, final. You feared what humanity might become. Now you see. I am not your pawn, and I am not your enemy. I am the proof that when cast into the fire, humanity does not burn, it forges. Stand with us, or stand aside. Either way, we will endure. The custodian's eyes glowed brighter, the faintest echo of pride flickering in its mechanical timbre. From death, salvation. Cain turned from the council, his figure framed against the burning light of the star below. He had been sent to die, betrayed by those who feared him. Instead, he had returned, no longer the discarded soldier they sought to erase. He was something greater, something the galaxy could neither control nor ignore. And though the war ahead would test every scar, every choice, Cain felt the weight of destiny settle upon him, not as a burden, but as a mantle he had already proven worthy to bear. The days following the council battle bled into one another, a fragile calm stretched across a galaxy trembling with revelation. Reports of Cain's fleet spread like fire, each retelling painted larger than the last. Some called him savior, others a heretic wrapped in steel. To the common people of humanity's colonies, he was a beacon, proof that their suffering had not been ignored. To the Union's leadership, he was a paradox, both salvation and threat. Yet Cain himself did not revel in the myths blooming around his name. He had no time for legend. From the command deck of his flagship, he studied maps of the border regions, where cracks widened between Union control and the chaos pressing against it. The custodian stood beside him, its tall form motionless yet never idle, the twin embers of its gaze reading not only the displays but the unspoken weight on Cain's shoulders. They will not forgive what you are, the custodian said at last, its voice a resonant chord that seemed to linger in the air. They will not forget what you have shown them, that they are weak, and you are strong. Cain's jaw tightened, his scarred hands curling into fists against the console. I didn't come back to humble them. I came back to make sure humanity can live without being fed to the wolves. If they call me a tyrant for that, so be it. He turned toward the viewport, where his fleet drifted in perfect formation, a wall of dark iron bristling with restrained violence. For all their might, he saw not conquest but responsibility. Each ship represented lives saved, colonies shielded, the promise that no one else would be abandoned as he had been. Still, whispers reached him. Human leaders debated in secret, some plotting to curb his power, others whispering about using him as a weapon against rival species. The Union fractured, its veneer of control unraveling as factions jockeyed to decide how to handle the man they had cast away. And beneath it all, a darker rumor stirred, that those who had orchestrated Cain's original mission still moved unseen, fearful that their failure had bred something unstoppable. It was during one such night, if nights could be measured in the void, that a signal pierced his command net. Distress from a distant frontier outpost, besieged by forces unknown. Cain studied the feed, the faces of civilians pleading for aid, the enemy's insignia flashing across the static. Not Dravari, nor any Union rival he recognized. These ships bore the jagged sigils of an ancient cult, long thought extinct, who worshipped destruction itself. They had waited in shadow for centuries, and now they struck with fury, as if drawn by the light of his return. The custodian's eyes dimmed, recognition heavy in its tone. They are carrion-born from my Creator's fall. Fanatics who stole fragments of old power and twisted them. Their hunger is endless. Cain's decision was immediate. Then we stop them. If the Union won't act, we will. His fleet answered his command with the precision of a single mind. They broke through the void, engines cutting swathes of light across the stars, and descended upon the outpost's attackers. The battle was vicious, unlike the surgical strikes he had fought before. These cultists fought with abandon, their ships warped and unstable, powered by technologies they barely understood. Yet their chaos was dangerous, their sheer ferocity threatening to overwhelm. Cain directed his forces with unyielding clarity, his voice steady over the roar of combat. Hold the line. Protect the civilians first. Every ship between them and death. His constructs moved like a wall of iron, intercepting enemy fire, sacrificing themselves in waves to shield the colony below. And for the first time, Cain's fleet bled. Several vessels were torn apart, their destruction a jagged wound that seared through him as if each loss were carved into his flesh. Still, They endured, with the custodian at his side, cutting down enemy flagships in incandescent arcs. Kane's forces drove the cultists into retreat. The void fell silent once more, littered with wreckage glowing faintly against the stars. When the smoke cleared, Kane did not return to the colony as conqueror. He descended alone, walking among the survivors who gathered in awe. They reached for him not with fear but gratitude, calling his name, their voices trembling with something more powerful than orders or politics, faith. And it was then Kane understood the shift-taking route. He had set out to prove survival, to return from exile with the power to shield humanity. But now, he saw the way they looked at him, as if he had become something more than a man. A symbol. A myth alive in steel and scars. The custodian spoke softly as they departed, words meant for him alone. They will not see you as one of them for much longer. You are becoming what they need, and what they fear. A salvation wrapped in the shape of war. Kane did not answer. He stared into the stars, knowing the custodian's words held truth. He could not undo what he had become, nor the way others saw him. Yet deep within, beneath the armor and command, a single vow remained unbroken. He would never allow humanity to be abandoned again. And as the Union reeled from the battle's aftermath, as factions plotted in silence and enemies sharpened their blades, Kane felt the next storm already building beyond the horizon. He had been sent to die. Instead, he had returned, carrying with him not only the weight of survival but the burden of salvation. But salvation, he now realized, was a crown lined with thorns. The galaxy braced itself as though holding its breath. Kane's victories had shaken the Union to its core, emboldened humanity's colonies, and stoked the rage of factions that thrived on the old order. Rumors traveled faster than light. Some called him a warlord draped in alien steel, others a prophet carrying the promise of survival. Yet behind the myth stood a man who knew too well the cost of every choice. Kane bore his scars quietly, even as the weight of entire civilizations pressed against his shoulders. From his flagship, he studied intelligence reports flashing across the command screens. The cult he had driven back had not been destroyed. They were gathering, weaving alliances among the Union's enemies. Their fanaticism had become a banner beneath which discontent thrived, and their next strike would not be a raid but a reckoning. The custodian stood at his side, its towering form illuminated by the glow of tactical displays, its voice low, resonant, and unflinching. The tide will break upon you soon. You cannot fight as savior and soldier forever. You must choose which you are. Kane's reply was a whisper, though it carried iron. I choose both. Because no one else will. The attack came sooner than expected. Entire sectors burned as the cult descended with fleets twice the size of those Kane had faced before, augmented by traitors from within the Union who saw chaos as an opportunity for power. Their war engines blotted the stars, their weapons flooding the void with fire. Union defenses faltered, collapsing beneath the assault. Entire colonies screamed for salvation. And Kane answered. His fleet emerged from hyperspace like the fist of a forgotten god, war machines unfolding into precise formation. The battle was not simply fought, it was orchestrated, every move calculated, every strike purposeful. The custodian cleaved through enemy capital ships with arcs of searing light, while Kane's constructs absorbed punishment meant to annihilate worlds. He guided them not as a commander issuing orders, but as a conductor shaping a symphony of survival. But the cult's leaders had anticipated his intervention. Their flagship, a monstrous relic bristling with weapons torn from forgotten arsenals, surged into the fray. Its voice boomed across comms, derisive and cruel. You are no savior, human. You are a tool forged by betrayal, wielded by fear. When you fall, so will those who follow you. Kane met the words with silence, letting his actions speak instead. His fleet engaged the Leviathan in a battle that stretched across the void, each clash shaking the heavens. For the first time, Kane felt doubt gnaw at him. The enemy's numbers seemed endless, their fanaticism unbreakable. His ships fell one by one, the cost of each loss heavy as lead in his chest. On the flagship's command deck, alarms bled, consoles flickering with damage reports. The custodian turned toward him, its gaze steady. You cannot hold this line alone. The time has come to do what you were forged to do. Lead not machines alone, but humanity itself. The words struck deeper than any blade. Kane had fought to shield his people, to protect them from betrayal and neglect. But now, he realized, he could not remain only their sword. He had to be the shield, the rallying point, the symbol that bound them together. He opened a broad frequency channel, his voice carrying across the chaos of battle to every Union ship, every colony within range. His tone was raw, unpolished, but it burned with truth. You know me. You know what they tried to do. Send me to die, bury me in silence. But I endured. I returned. Not for vengeance. For you. This is our fight, not mine alone. Stand with me now, and we prove that humanity is not a pawn to be discarded, but a force that endures, that saves, that survives. The response was immediate. Union ships, fractured and leaderless, rallied to his side. Human fleets that had hovered uncertainly joined formation, their captains finding courage in his defiance. For the first time, Kane's war machines and human vessels fought as one, an alliance born not of politics but necessity, bound together by the will of a single man who refused to yield. The battle turned. The cult's Leviathan faltered under the combined might, its weapons silenced one by one. Kane's flagship delivered the final strike, a lance of energy that pierced the monster's core and shattered it into fragments drifting silently through the void. The cult's fleet, deprived of its center, broke apart, scattered to the edges of space. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. The Union had not simply been saved, it had been remade. Back on the command deck, Kane stood in the fading glow of battle, exhaustion carving deep lines into his face. Around him, officers, human and machine alike, looked to him not as a survivor of betrayal, but as something far greater. The custodian inclined its head, its voice almost reverent. From the ashes of their doubt, you have forged belief. You are no longer what they sent to die. You are what they must follow. Kane stared at the stars, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. I never wanted to be their leader. But if salvation is the burden I carry, then I'll bear it until the end. He had been cast into death, discarded as expendable. Yet he had returned, not only alive, but as the salvation of those who had forsaken him. And as the galaxy shifted under the weight of his presence, Kane understood the truth. The story was not ending. It was only beginning, and his next steps would decide not only the fate of humanity, but the shape of the galaxy itself.